Variable Progression Rate, or VPR, is one of the many procedures that the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority offers to schools to accommodate the varied ways students engage in the senior phase of learning. In this example, a VPR student is a non-sample folio exiting the subject in 2014 as a proposed HA1 and is exiting the school in 2015. At verification, the panel recommends that the sample folio at HA1 is more appropriately placed at SA10. The school considers this advice in relation to the VPR non-sample folio placed on the same rung. In 2014, the school submits the exiting cohort Form R6 with 14 students leaving the school at the end of 2014. Since the VPR student is exiting in 2015, they are on a separate attached R6. The school will attach a photocopied Form R6 for the VPR student. The principal has signed both forms. The VPR student was proposed as an HA1. At verification, the review panel recommended that Folio D was more appropriately placed at SA10. The school has accepted this advice and decided that this also applies to the VPR student. The review panel chair has accurately completed verification. Both forms are signed and completed by the review panel chair once agreement has been reached with the school. The VPR student is subject to Form R7 procedures in 2014 if changes are required after post-verification assessment is completed. However, the student will not be subject to any panel advice offered for the exiting cohort in 2015. In 2015, the school submits the exiting cohort Form R6 with all 10 students leaving the school at the end of 2015. They attach the completed photocopied Form R6 and transfer the student onto the same rung placement as agreed to through 2014 verification and any R7 process. The principal has signed both forms. Note this time that the VPR student is not required as a sample. The student has already been verified. Note that the student must be included in the initial column when the Form R6 is sent to verification, though the student is not subject to the process. This is because all students in the Year 12 cohort who have completed study of at least one semester of an approved school work program must be placed as a sample or as a non-sample on the Form R6. Let's briefly recap this scenario. In 2014, the VPR Form R6 was a photocopy to distinguish it from the Form R6. All forms are signed by the review panel chair and the principal. The school has considered the panel advice in regard to Folio D and has decided that the advice also applies to the VPR folio. In 2014, the VPR student did not appear on the 2014 Green Form R6 because the student was on the VPR Form R6. Advice from panel that was relevant to the VPR folio was written on both the R6 and VPR Form R6. The school has used comments to note the attachment of a VPR Form R6. This is helpful but not required. In 2014, the VPR Form R6 goes with the Green Form R6 to verification, but the VPR folio does not appear on the R6. Advice from this verification has been applied to the VPR student as it was deemed relevant by the school. In 2015, the VPR student was not included in the sampling pattern because the student did not complete the subject with this cohort, and the folio has already been through the moderation process. The review panel chair will check and note that the student is correctly placed on the Form R6 at SA10. Any advice from the panel about SA folios on this Form R6 will not be applied to the VPR student. And in 2015, the VPR student appears on the Form R6 but is not subject to any further moderation advice. This is the fourth in a series of 4 videos explaining the VPR procedure. The first video in this series describes the VPR procedure, while the second, third, and fourth videos demonstrate worked examples of students undertaking studies through a variable progression rate.